Hi everyone, this is Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn, and together with chesslecture.com, I'd like to welcome you to today's video. Now today I want to show you one of my very instructive games that I played recently online in Blitz, yet my opponent, who is expert level, believe it or not, did not know basic thing about square weaknesses or square complexes in chess. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's start with the opening. First, it starts as the Grand Prix Attack. This is the opening that I used to play when I was younger. It was shown to me by my coach Roman Djindjikhashvili, and we co-authored the book Chess Openings for White Explained, sharing with you all the ideas of this opening. Now, as time went by, I became more of a positional player, grandmaster level player. I decided to add more and more openings into my repertoire, but somehow the Grand Prix Attack faded from my repertoire. Although I do believe this is a very powerful opening, especially if you know what you're doing. So here I played the move bishop b5. Typically f4 is the right move order, but we just transposed. f4, bishop g7, knight f3. And here, again, I'm playing expert level opponent who plays absolutely horrible move a6. Now, why is that such a horrible move, guys? Typically, we're taught that in chess, the bishop pair is very valuable, right? If I give up the bishop for the knight, two bishops against bishop and knight is almost worth half a pawn. And I'm the first one to say that to you, that two bishops is really a force to be reckoned with. But guys, you have to look at other factors, such as time and weaknesses. a6 is one of those waste of time moves, and it helps white strategy. Why did I put the bishop on b5? Well, you guessed it. At some point, I want to double the pawns. So after he took with the pawn. Even though he opens up this bishop, he has created a weakness, those double pawns. Also, there is another possible weakness. At first, you guys may not even notice it. Try to, first of all, figure out what that square is. There's another square that got weak with the move a6. And that's right, it's the b6 square. Right now, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal at all, but you will see shortly this is going to be the downfall of all of black structure. So this game starts as a Grand Prix Attack. Now it sort of becomes more of a positional battle, but then later the attack picks up with force. So first I played d3, e6. So this is kind of a typical move to get the knight out. Again, what he's doing to his bishop is not recommended. Remember, the two bishops love open diagonals. Yes, he's got one great bishop on g7, but the bishop on c8 is extremely passive. So I just castle, knight e7, a4. Now, this move a4 is a typical grandmaster level move. If your opponent doesn't understand the concept of square weaknesses, he may not even look at this move and think this move is serious at all. And remember, in a blitz game, nobody's going to look at the move in a4 and say, what is White's idea? What's the deep strategic implications? He just reacts naturally with the move b6. He could have also castled. I mean, castle would actually be even worse than the move b6 because my idea is to play a5 and to really secure that square. So you can actually say that he did kind of was preparing for my move a5, but in reality, b6 move is kind of useless. There's only one correct way to prepare for my idea, and it is for him to play a5, followed by b6, followed by bishop a6, and finally c4. That is, of course, if I let him. Obviously, I'm going to prepare the b3 pawn push, protect the knight, make sure that bishop on c8 never sees the light of day, and slowly outplay black. But I think a5 would have been more prudent decision. Now look what happens. At first, b6 looks pretty logical. a5, though, immediately undermining those pawns. This looks devastating if he takes two sets of double pawns. They're simply going to fall apart quickly. So he plays logical move b5, but now we have what is called a chronic weakness, that pawn on c5, which I immediately target with bishop e3. Now my opponent plays bishop d4. He decides to maybe set up a tactical challenge, maybe to force me to take and undouble his pawns. But again, this felt wrong to me, and I think I found a very nice way to punish this move. Now, in hindsight, what should black do? The position is already really uncomfortable, but I think he just has to go for this move c4, even though I still believe white's better. But at the very least, he's fighting for some kind of counterplay. So now, why is bishop d4 a bad move? Well, obviously, I'm not going to fall for the cheapo, takes, and I'm going to lose a piece. I also don't want to do this and really kind of create those nice pawns, and he's going to do this. Even though his king side is damaged, he can fix it later by putting the king here and the pawn there. So station is not going to be as bad for black. But I think I found a very instructive way to kick that bishop on d4. Why don't you guys try to figure out my plan? How do I get rid of the bishop on d4? With dividends. So that's the question for everyone. And the answer is we need to increase firepower on the g1, a7 diagonal. And the firepower is increased by using my queen. Queen d2. You could have also played queen e1, same idea, castles, and queen f2. If you saw this idea, good job. You are a very strong strategic chess player. You understand the concepts. And now, believe it or not, black is strategically busted. Because he cannot do anything about my threats. He's either going to lose the pawn or allow his bishop to get traded. So he decides to take on c3. Not a good idea, but already a difficult position. It's hard to give black an advice. I took with the pawn, even though he may argue that he doubled my pawns and he got rid of his weakness. Now we have a classic good attacking bishop versus bad useless bishop. All his pawns are on light squares. That's not helping him at all. As a matter of fact, it creates very cool dark square complex weaknesses here, which I call Swiss cheese. If you are a big fan of Swiss cheese, you probably know what I mean by using that reference. Lots and lots of holes. And here are the little holes. Right here, right here, right here, right here, right here, perhaps here. For my pieces to simply come in and win over the game. Now, at this point, the game is more or less on autopilot for me. You can say, yes, you're a grandmaster, everything is easy for you. But guys, this is the kind of concepts that I'm teaching you. By now, it should be pretty obvious to everyone that you cannot play chess like that if you're black. You cannot just give away a whole complex of squares where you have no piece who can protect them. And now the question is, how does white take advantage of this? Well, first I play bishop b6, tempo on the queen, another tempo on the queen, making her really uncomfortable, and on top of it, pinning the knight. So the next stage is put more firepower, queen h4, tempo on the knight, and the big threat knight g5. At this point, I thought, well, the game is definitely over. If he plays rook e8, knight g5, it's just made unstoppable. But I've got to give credit to my opponent for not completely falling apart. He found the only defensive try here. Why don't you guys see how you can defend as black? And if you need more time, go ahead and pause the video. And the move is actually quite simple. f6. Notice how this pawn temporarily works defensive function on the e5 and g5 square, stops knight g5, and also the queen is still protecting the knight, and it's also stopping my queen from attacking the knight. So it's a multi-function move, as we say in chess. The key, though, is to realize black is still utterly paralyzed, and all I need to do is improve my position. His queen is paralyzed, can't move, so I just need to bring one more piece into the attack, which I do immediately, rook a to e1. And here my opponent, who is under extreme pressure the whole game, collapses. Okay, keep in mind, guys, this is a blitz game, so we're not going to blame him for this blunder. He plays bishop d7, forgetting the fact that the knight is on pre. I took the knight, and he duly resigned, which I actually have to give him credit for, because a lot of my opponents online keep playing until mate, hoping for miracles or trying to flag me, which I'm not a big fan of, to tell you the truth. Now, let's think about this position for a moment. What would be a logical move? Well, let's say he wants to connect the rooks and complete development. Yes, he's putting the bishop on a horrible square, but what else to do? So then the question for everyone is, how would you continue to play if you're white? By the way, the pawn is still taboo because the knight is under attack from the bishop. So the logical continuation here is to really ramp through those squares with e5, hoping he's going to do this and drop the knight. But we have to calculate some lines. For instance, knight f5 hitting the queen is pretty logical. Now when the queen moves, for instance, queen h3, the rook is hit and g4 is coming. So this is one way to increase your attacking potential. It does require just a little bit of calculation, and we can easily see white is dominating. Now, if you don't want to do any calculation, there is an even simpler move. Just play g4. Yes, you're opening your king, but guess what? All of his army is so utterly paralyzed that either e5 or g5 or any similar moves would really put lots of pressure on him. I personally like the move e5. So if he locks those dark squares with king g7, e5 is coming, and it's game over. So you see, guys, sometimes basic principles in chess, such as paying attention to pawn weaknesses, square complexes, is all that it takes to win a game or lose a game. So again, my expert level opponent did not know these very basic things, and he got duly punished. So that's why, guys, you have to think about these things all the time, and hopefully you have learned the lesson and will apply this to your own games. Thank you very much. This was Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn for ChessLecture.com. Goodbye.